Welcome to the Hanukkah sermon. Now, I am no expert on Judaism, and I do not claim to be, and please do not think of me as one because I am not. But I had a mom, as many of you know, a middle-class white woman from Cleveland, Ohio. And it's not really clear to me how it happened, but somehow when she was in college, she ended up the vice president of Hillel, a Jewish religious group at her school. And if we fast forward several years later, she's living in rural Ohio with 2 young children. And the church options there were Protestant Christian or other Protestant Christian. So my parents chose neither, and instead we celebrated Christmas and Hanukkah and solstice in December time, and several other holidays from those various traditions throughout the year. And I loved Christmas, I did, but it was this busy time of trying to make it to all the different grandparents' houses so that none of them would be offended. And most of my grandparents were divorced, so this was like 3 or 4 different houses you're trying to make it to on Christmas Day. And while it was lovely and love-filled, it was also pretty busy and a little bit stressful. But Hanukkah was just for us and anyone who wanted to come. And we welcomed family members to join us, and we would make more latkes if they came, but they came to us, and it was so much less stressful. But the lack of stress wasn't the only thing that I really liked about Hanukkah. I also liked grating way too many potatoes for the latkes, and onions that go in the latkes, and always made me cry a little bit. I liked learning Hebrew on the dreidel, which is this game of chance where if you win, you get either money or chocolate, which was great for a child. And also really great for a child was that each day of Hanukkah, each of the 8 nights, the children got a present. And they were usually small, but really meaningful. And it was this lovely added kind of wintertime gift. But now that I'm in seminary, I remember different things as being best. I'm a big believer in ritual and the value of ritual. And there's something about standing around the menorah, lighting candles together, and saying words together over and over again, time after time, night after night, that is just really valuable and meaningful, that creates a kind of faith and community and lasting meaningfulness that can't be replaced. So I'm gonna tell us the story of Hanukkah, and I want to emphasize here that my intention is for this to be a story. I am not trying to relay the historical facts of what exactly happened to have the Hanukkah story come to light. This is a story of our faith, a story, well, not so much of our faith, but a story of faith and how it can have meaningful impact for us. So once upon a time, about 200 years before the time that we call Common Era, King Antiochus IV, nicknamed the Madman, was ruling over Jerusalem. As many rulers do, he had appointed a rather corrupt man to lead the Jewish temple in Jerusalem, with the understanding that that man would bring as much money into the Greek Empire as possible. We certainly can't relate to this at all. One day, Antiochus was away fighting a war in Egypt, and it became rumored that he had been killed. The Jews in Jerusalem took this opportunity to oust the leader of the temple. But, of course, Antiochus was not actually dead, and when he came back, he was displeased with the rebellion. And in response, he perpetuated a massacre of the Jews. Thousands were killed. He then banned Jewish traditions like the Sabbath, circumcision, and dietary restrictions. He burned the law scrolls and required religious and community leaders to sacrifice and eat pigs, the unclean flesh. If those leaders refused, they were killed. and hundreds more died. This was a time of oppression and pain, but people took hope from faith. And it's good because the king's men were traveling from village to village, converting and killing. One day, the henchmen of Antiochus arrived in the village where Mattatyahu, an old priest, lived. The Greek officer built an altar in the marketplace of the village and demanded that Mattatyahu offer sacrifices to the Greek gods. Mattatyahu replied, "I, my sons and brothers, as was fitting for the time, are determined to remain loyal to the covenant, which our God made with our ancestors." When he said that, a Hellenistic Jew approached the altar to offer a sacrifice in his place. Mattatyahu grabbed a sword and killed him, and his sons and friends fell upon the Greek officers and men. Mattatyahu knew that Antiochus would be enraged when he heard what had happened, so he left the village and fled with his sons and friends to the hills of Judea. All the rebel Jews joined them, and they were called the Maccabees. They formed groups, and from time to time they left their hiding places to fight the enemy camps and outposts, and to destroy the Greek altars that were built by order of Antiochus. People had faith in each other. They had faith in their faith community to support them. Mattatyahu died soon after, and his son Judah took over military leadership. It is Judah who defeated several of Antiochus's little armies, and it is Judah who made Antiochus realize that he was going to need a bigger army. So Antiochus gathered 40,000 men and sent them all against the Maccabees. Even though the Maccabees were smaller and less militarily advanced, they eventually defeated the tyrants and returned to Jerusalem to liberate it. They cleared out the foreign altars of the temple, they got rid of the sacred oil that had been defiled by the Greeks, and rebuilt a new altar. They also wanted a new menorah, as their golden one had been stolen. But they couldn't afford gold, so they made another one out of cheaper metal. And when they went to light it, they discovered that they didn't have much sacred oil, only a small container, enough for just one day. But by a miracle from God, even though there was only enough for one day, the oil burned for 8 days. Enough time for more holy oil to be made, so that the temple could be restored to glory. Their faith kept them going, even when all seemed hopeless, and gave them the strength to try. Now, normally, in a story, this is the part where I would go, "The end." But of course, it is not the end. Time and history did not end with a miracle of oil. The rest of the story doesn't matter for our story, but it does matter that the story doesn't end. The people in this story didn't know that the oil would last for 8 days and everything would be okay. None of the historical stories happen in a vacuum. Our story doesn't happen in a vacuum. They had faith that the story would have a happy ending, even when it looked like it wouldn't. So what can our story learn from this story? First of all, this is not a happy story. This is not a story of kings and princes riding triumphantly into the city. This is not a story of flowers and joy and love and happiness. The story starts with a corrupt ruler and gets worse from there. This is a story of oppression and anger and a split in a religious tradition. This is a story of a massacre. It's a story of refugees, of leaving home and family and the land that you know and love. It is a story of hope, of faith and hope in a God that seemed to have abandoned this world. It is a story of loss and sorrow and faith. Unitarian Universalists are not always so good at faith. Perhaps you've heard the stories. I'm sure that none of these things have ever happened here, but maybe you've heard the stories of donors who wanted to give money to the church, wanted to buy a roof for the church, as long as they got to pick the roof. Not a lot of faith there. Perhaps you've heard of the donors who want to pay for the church to get repainted, as long as they get to pick the color. Maybe you've heard of congregants who want the RE program to teach a lesson on blank, and they wanted to include this and that and the other thing, but they don't actually want to teach it, and they don't want to give the money to pay someone else to teach it. Maybe you've heard of congregants who are offended by something that happened, and they tell everyone in the church except the person who did it. Maybe you've heard about congregations who want to hire a minister, but don't want to give control of worship over to that minister. Congregations who want their minister to make them a social justice church, as long as they don't have to work too hard or be too uncomfortable. Do you think the Maccabees were comfortable? As their sacred sites were ransacked, as their elders and leaders were killed, as they watched their friends and fellow villagers turn against them, I doubt they were comfortable. Here is a group of people who were willing to die for their faith. Perhaps more meaningful, here is a group of people who were willing to kill for their faith. And I'm not advocating that. But their faith was so deep and so strong and so unshakable that when they met army after army after army, they pressed on. Their faith was so deep that after losing their elders and their loved ones, they still went back to the temple of their God and cleared out the foreigners. Their faith was so deep that even though they had pretty much nothing material, even though they had lost so much, they had lost their beautiful, priceless gold menorah, but they gave what they had to build another one out of cheaper materials so that their place of worship could have what it needed. I doubt the people giving that money stipulated exactly what the menorah had to look like. They had bigger problems to worry about. Don't we have bigger problems to worry about? What is it in our lives that gives us faith like that? I wonder if we have enough faith in the 7 principles to die for them. I question if we trust the person sitting next to us enough to consider dying for them. I mean, come on. If we can't let go of control and trust in our leaders to have the church's best wishes at heart, if we can't let go and trust in people who have dedicated years of their life to figure out how best to support our congregations, if we can't trust our boards, our ministers, our financial committees, I wonder what we are going to trust. If we aren't going to have faith in each other, in this faith, in this community, in this church, then I don't think we have faith. And I think that's a loss. Without faith, we don't have a real community to work with us to victory. Without faith, we have no rebuilt temple, no refreshed altar, no light for 8 days. Without faith, we can give up on hope. But this doesn't mean we can't have faith. There's nothing in the actual practices of Hanukkah that UUs can't have. We can and do have our own practices that feed the body. Coffee hour is one of my favorite times. It's a sacrament of the body that feeds people's souls as well. We already have our own kind of menorah, our flaming chalice. You can get a flaming chalice for your home to light as often or as infrequently as you like, saying the words of our faith. You can learn and teach the language of our tradition, the language of justice and freedom and community. I love going to churches who have unison readings they do every week or a song that they sing every week, like Spirit of Life. I think that's a great way to build faith and community, speaking or singing all together. And perhaps we have no dreidel to learn with, but the game Counting Sheep was invented by a UU, so we got something. And perhaps most importantly, we can build our faith. We can work on trusting each other. The real miracle of the Maccabees is not that the oil lasted for 8 days, it's that they had any faith at all to try and find the oil. The miracle is that they continued to make holy oil, continued to have faith in their God and each other through the horrors of persecution and death. They didn't know that things were going to be okay. They had every reason to believe that things would not be okay. But their faith gave them hope. They were able to have hope because they had faith in something bigger than just them. They had faith in their God, and we can have faith in each other and in our communities. Unitarian Universalists can have faith. It's not a dirty word. It's a word that makes miracles happen. It's a word that brings light out of nothing. And we can have light. We can have faith in each other and in our church. It's not going to be comfortable. It's not going to be easy. The church is not a magic feel-good place of love and light. If you have faith here, I guarantee you that your faith will be betrayed at some point. We are going to fall down. We might give money to repaint with no stipulations, and the paint might look horrible. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't give the money. Faith sometimes means loss and compromising. Faith means focusing less on what you believe and know to be true and more on what this community that we have elected to be a part of believes and knows to be true. And don't get me wrong, I'm not asking you to give up what you believe in. I'm asking you to believe in us too. I'm asking that you believe that we have enough, that our collective bounty is more than enough. I'm asking you to have enough faith to stay with us even when it gets rough. Now, as we head into another year in this political climate, now more than ever we need each other. We need to run and join the bands of the oppressed as they come down from the hills. We need to trust our church neighbor, listen to the person next to us in the pew, and rally behind our leaders, even though we do not agree with each other on everything. We will never agree with each other on everything. And the Maccabees surely did not agree on everything. But if they could work together and have faith when they were living together in a makeshift camp in the woods, then we can surely have faith in this beautiful chapel. That faith we have here will give us the hope to continue on. We can have hope even though it asks something from us. Hope is not free or cheap or easy. To paraphrase Emily Dickinson, hope is a thing with feathers, but it asks for more than a crumb. It asks for perhaps the most difficult thing, faith in something often unseen. By holding on to faith, by having faith, our light that was only supposed to last for one day will last as long as we need it to. Like the Maccabees, faith will carry us all to the next thing we need, to carry us to the next thing we need, to carry us to the next thing we need. When one of us falters, the person next to us lifts us up, and that is faith. When we just can't handle tyranny anymore, know that there will be others there to raid the enemy camps with you, and that is faith. Have faith. Have faith in each other. Have faith in who we are together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of all. Blessed is God, and blessed are we. Have faith, friends. It will not be comfortable or easy, but we can do it. We have to do it. Because in a time of darkness, it is faith that will create the light to last for 8 days. Thank you. I love you. Amen.